The story begins with two students from the Alzano Imperial Magic Academy. Their names are Rumia and Sistine. Rumia is standing on the street waiting for Sistine to join her. Suddenly they encounter a strange man named Glenn Radars. He comes running towards them in a hurry, but in a rush, Sistine uses her magical powers to push him away. Every student is getting frustrated in the classroom since their new teacher hasn't shown up yet. Suddenly, the man walks in. It is Glenn again, who reveals himself to be their new magic instructor. After some more frustration from the students, he starts teaching them. However, he simply asks them to study on their own while he falls asleep. That is my dream job. Even the teachers complain about Glenn, but the principal says that Celia has recommended him, one of the mightiest magicians. It's later revealed that Celia has hired him temporarily until they find a new good instructor. He initially refuses, saying he's not even qualified for it, but Celia blackmails him into joining. She even uses her magic on him to intimidate him, and he agrees. The next day, Glenn continued to teach nonchalantly. His students become angry with Glenn, and Glenn ran away. The next day, Glenn still told his students to study on their own, and an enraged Sistine challenges Glenn to a magic duel. They'll have a match between shock bolt magic. Glenn loses this match and runs away, saying he actually never agreed to any of Sistine's demands. Glenn told his students to study on their own the next day, despite the fact that he had lost the duel yesterday. A student comes forward to ask him for assistance, however Sistine steps forward and offers to help. She says that Glenn doesn't know a thing about magic. This leads to a debate between Glenn and Sistine regarding the usefulness of magic. Sistine says that it's useful in giving them a better understanding of the universe. However, Glenn asserts that it's only useful for killing people. This causes Sistine to cry and run away. Later, Glenn notices Rumia, who's studying her magic. He goes to the lab and points out that she's lacking enough mercury. He helps her out by telling her a little trick about magic circles. Rumia gets delighted to see that her magic circle is working now. They both walk together and talk. Rumia reveals that she was saved by a powerful mage and wants to repay that debt by leading humanity, so they don't misuse magic. The next day, Glenn apologizes to the classroom, especially Sistine. He calls everyone an idiot and says they don't properly understand magic. Glenn shows them another version of the shock bolt that wasn't described in the textbooks. He shows further uses of the lightning magic and quickly becomes a very popular teacher in the entire school. The next day, all the teachers are heading towards a meeting, and they have Glenn in charge. However, the school is attacked by a mysterious group that wants to kidnap Rumia, who's a princess. Sistine is also kidnapped. Glenn finds her and reveals his powers. He manages to beat him even without using magic and saves Sistine. Sistine reveals that Rumia has been taken hostage by this mysterious organization. Glenn looks at the person he defeated. He has a strange tattoo. Just then, Celicia contacts him and Glenn informs her of everything. He reveals that the group is called the Researchers of Divine Wisdom. Glenn and Celicia both come to the conclusion that one of the teachers has betrayed them. Suddenly, a portal opens and the enemy's ghost army appears to attack Glenn. He tries to punch the enemies, but it's of no use, so he instructs Sistine to use her magic, and together they manage to beat his army. However, this extinction ray causes Glenn to collapse to the floor. Just then, the leader of the group steps forward and fights with Glenn. He easily overpowers him since Glenn is exhausted. He wasn't capable of defeating him alone, so Glenn teams up with Sistine again to put an end to him. He distracts him while Sistine uses her magical abilities to assist him, and finally Glenn is able to deliver a finishing blow. Afterward, Glenn goes to save Rumia alone since Sistine has fallen asleep. It turns out Huey is the traitor, and he reveals his plan to blow up the academy and take Rumia with him. Glenn uses his own blood to end the spell. However, as he reaches the last circle, he collapses. However, Rumia manages to heal him and he successfully ends the spell and defeats Huey with a punch to the face. This guy sure loves punching. The school is back to normal now. Queen Alicia is the mother of Rumia and Empress of Alzano. She, alongside her bodyguard Zelos, will visit the academy and witness the magic competition. Next up, we see Sistine and Rumia motivating their classroom for the competition, but they don't seem too enthusiastic about it. Glenn walks in and then he decides on a roster for the tournament. Glenn actually wants to win the huge prize money associated with the tournament, so he's interested in it. While the students were playing, an argument between two teams broke out. The other class was led by a teacher named Haley. He asks Glenn to take his class somewhere else, but he refuses, and they both challenge each other. Glenn bets their 3-month wages on his class's victory. Sistine also agrees to it, and the students start training hard. This started to seem like the anime adaptation of Harry Potter. The magic competition has finally begun and Queen Alicia has arrived. She begins the competition and Glenn's class puts all their best efforts in. Moreover, due to Glenn's clever leadership, they're easily able to win the initial rounds. Rumia is also competing in the tournament. Her opponents are tough, however Glenn says that she has a stronger mental fortitude than other students. As Count Zest continues to cast stronger spells, more and more of these students are eliminated. However, Rumia manages to win against all odds since her opponent has lost consciousness, and Queen Alicia is very proud of her. Two mysterious people named Albert and Riel appear. They seem familiar with Glenn. They're both on a mission to monitor Zelos alongside the guardsman who has been acting suspiciously. They suspect that they might go against the Queen. While everyone's having lunch, Lynn approaches Glenn and tells her that she's not feeling confident about her competition. He transforms himself into Rumia and boosts her morale, which works out, and Lynn starts preparing for her competition. Later on, Rumia brings Glenn some lunch and they eat together. Queen Alicia walks in on them and asks for forgiveness. It is revealed that Glenn was part of the Imperial Court Mage Corps. He says that it's okay and there's no need to apologize. She tries talking to Rumia, but she refuses to recognize her. It turns out Rumia has a severe case of mommy issues. When the Queen gets back, she's put under arrest by Zelos. Albert and Riel had seen what had happened. He stops Riel from advancing. Meanwhile, Sistine comes to Glenn to inform him that Rumia is missing, and he tells her everything. Glenn finds Rumia in the park and consoles her. Rumia reveals that she hasn't forgiven her for what she did, but Glenn manages to bring her around. Just then, the royal soldiers try to arrest Rumia as well. Glenn manages to take Rumia with him and escape. He contacts Alicia and it's revealed that she too has been taken hostage, and it's up to Glenn to save them. As he's done talking to them, Albert and Riel arrive on the scene, and Riel leaps forward with an attack. Albert puts Riel down with a bolt of lightning. Glenn reveals that they're his partners from the Imperial Corps. Glenn asks Albert to take care of his class through the tournament and then takes Rumia away. Now Albert temporarily replaced Glenn as the class instructor. He leads the team of students to further victories. First up is Lynn, who successfully manages to use her transfiguration spell and wins all the points. There is a duel battle in the tournament's finale, and Sistine has to lead her class to victory. On the other hand, Zelos instructs a guard to find and end Glenn and Rumia. As the final competition starts, the opponents don't even stand a chance as Sistine easily beats them using a modified version of her spell called Wall of Tempest, and Class 2 is announced as the winner. During the prize distribution ceremony, Albert and Riel revealed themselves to be Glenn and Rumia. They had switched places to get easier access to the Queen. Glenn manages to free Celicia and Queen from the magic, and immediately Celicia puts up a magical barrier to protect the students from the conflict. Inside this magical barrier, Zelos and Glenn put up a fight, however Glenn manages to defeat him, and the Queen is reunited with Rumia. Meanwhile, Albert and Riel were investigating the mastermind behind this incident, which is the Queen's handmaiden named Eleanor. But Eleanor managed to escape. After everything is finished, Albert and Riel return to their base. The Queen also returned to her palace. Glenn and his students celebrate the victory. After winning the magic competition, one day Rumia and Sistine were talking to Glenn when suddenly Riel attacked them from behind. She reveals that she's assigned to protect Rumia and has disguised herself as a school student. At school, Riel exhibits unusual magic that other students have never seen. Since she was part of the Queen's special forces, she was extremely powerful and could use such type of magic. After this incident, other students try to stay away from her. At lunch, Sistine and Rumia approach her. They try talking to her and gradually get acquainted with her. They finally manage to befriend her and get along quite well with the other students too. The next morning, Glenn announces that he's taking a class trip to the alchemy research lab. Since the lab was situated on the beach, all the male students were also quite excited. Suddenly, Albert reveals himself and says that he's also assigned to protect Rumia. They have finally arrived in the city and they all have fun on the beach, and the boys decide to peek into the women's rooms at night. However, Glenn manages to stop them. Later, Riel talks to Glenn about his past. Riel is angry with Glenn because he left the special forces. She says all she wanted was to fight alongside him. Later on, we see that Eleanor is standing on the shore alongside a mysterious guy. It's revealed that researchers of divine wisdom are back in action and are planning something suspicious. The next day, the students are walking towards the alchemy research lab. Sistine tries talking to Riel during the extensive walk, but she lashes out at her. At the lab, they're greeted by Burke's Bauman. who is the head of the White Alchemy Research Lab. He gives the students a tour around the lab, and all of them get fascinated by the research being conducted there. Rumia and Sistine seem interested in resurrection alchemy. However, Burke says it has been discontinued due to moral reasons, but it seems that he's suspicious. Later, when Glenn tries to talk to Riel, she runs away to the shore, and here she meets her dead brother. Albert is watching all this from a distance. However, he has to confront a magician named Shamlet Eleanor. It is revealed that she possesses some sort of regeneration magic. On the other hand, Riel's brother convinces her to kidnap Rumia, and Glenn reaches there and tries to confront Riel. However, her brother orders her to attack Glenn, and she does, causing Glenn to collapse to the floor. When Albert finds out about Glenn, he gets distracted, and Eleanor escapes. Turns out this was their plan after all. Riel goes to Rumia's room and kidnaps her. Sistine tries to stop her, but she runs away. Albert brings Glenn to Sistine since she is an expert at healing people through magic, and she proceeds to heal him. Glenn finally recovers and wakes up. He finds Albert sitting near him. Albert invites Glenn to save Riel alongside Rumia. He also says that if the mission asks for Riel to be eliminated, he won't hesitate. On the other hand, it turns out that the lead researcher of the alchemy lab has joined hands with Eleanor and Cyan Rayford, Riel's brother. It's revealed that they plan to use Rumia as an amplifier for their research. Albert reveals that he had enchanted Rumia with a spell that allows him to track her. As they reach the lab, they're greeted by several monsters, but they successfully defeat them, paving their way toward the lab. Since Eleanor knows about Glenn's arrival, she deems it an appropriate time to escape. As they finally reach the lab's entrance, Burks transforms into a monster and attacks Albert and Glenn. However, unlike the other monsters, he's quite powerful. Albert agrees to fight him and instructs Glenn to find Rumia. Glenn has finally found Rumia. He comes forward to fight Cyan and release Rumia, but Riel stands in his way and attacks Glenn. However, Glenn intelligently defeats her using mind games. Then he goes after Cyan, and it's revealed that Riel is an artificial human being, created through experimentation, and Cyan oversaw this experiment. Riel remembers all of this. Suddenly, multiple clones of Riel attack Glenn. As he fights them, he also assures Riel that she isn't a terrible person. Finally, Glenn is able to defeat them and Cyan. Albert has also defeated Burks, and all of them return to the beach. The next day, Glenn meets someone named Leos Klados, who turns out to be Sistine's fiance. He was invited to the school as a teacher, and he had also heard about Glenn's popularity. The teachers are also celebrating Leos' arrival, but Celicia is quite suspicious of his sudden arrival. Leos teaches his first class, and every student is impressed by his teaching style. Glenn is also attending this class and is worried that the high level of magic being taught to them might corrupt them. Leos approaches Sistine and asks her to go on a walk with him, and while walking, he proposes to Sistine. However, she refuses because she wants to pursue her dream, but Leos insults her, saying it's impossible to fulfill that dream. Glenn, who is hiding behind a bush, emerges and takes Sistine's side. Leos asks him to leave them alone since it's their personal matter. However, Sistine just says that she actually loves Glenn instead of Leos. This leads to an extensive argument between Leos and Glenn, leading to a duel. Glenn then calls in his class and tells them about the duel, saying he'll train them for it. At night, Glenn meets Albert, who tells him that a drug called angel dust has been smuggled into the city. Glenn, who has dealt with it prior, asks Albert to include him in the investigation, but Albert refuses. Afterward, Leos is revealed to be talking to a mysterious man about the duel. The man seemingly predicted this outcome and asked Leos to put on his best show. The next morning, all the students are gathered in the field for the match between Leos and Glenn. Hallie tells them all the rules. It's established that they will compete in a military magic war simulation, and the match begins. Leos' class uses the kingdom's high-level military tactics, and the odds look in his favor. He had given special training to the students in no time. However, their attacks aren't too effective because Glenn uses underhanded methods to win. Glenn had set up a trap for Leos' team in the woods, and his students led Leos' team towards the forest, where they got trapped one by one. Glenn is proud of himself, however the time runs out and the match ends in a draw. Leos doesn't handle it well and challenges Glenn in a one-on-one battle, and Glenn agrees and they decide a date and place. Meanwhile, Albert and his team are trying to find angel dust to get rid of it, and they find various victims. Leos meets the same mysterious person again and tells him about the duel. Later at night, Sistine shows up at Glenn's house to thank him for standing by her side. Soon Leo shows up, and after provoking Glenn, he initiates an attack on him. He uses a special ability called Tulpas, which brings imaginary beings into existence. If only I could do that to my waifus. These beings injure Glenn ahead of the duel set for tomorrow. Sistine tries to help him, but Leos grabs her and threatens to reveal Rumia's real identity. Glenn doesn't show up to the duel due to his fatal injuries, and Sistine is forced to marry Leos. When Sistine walks into the class, everyone asks what happened, and as she's telling them, Leos takes her away. Rumia tells Riel that she visited Glenn and he promised that he won't let anyone harm Sistine. Soon the wedding ceremony begins, and Sistine is clearly unhappy throughout. Before the completion of the ceremony, Glenn barges in and takes Sistine with him. It turns out the reason Glenn was absent was that he was preparing for a serious fight against Leos. Suddenly infected with angel dust, a group of people appeared at Glenn's place. In the place of the disciples also appeared an infected person. Then members of the Special Forces unit of the Royal Magic Court came to help. Finally, Leos arrives at Glenn's place. It turns out that Leos is actually Jadis Lawfan, a former member of the Royal Magic Court. He explains that the real Leos died after the competition. Glenn sends Sistine away and fights Lofan. It turns out that Lofan's goal was to find Akashic records because someone who holds Akashic records had supreme power. The battle between Glenn and Lofan was fierce. Glenn realizes he can't defeat him alone, so Glenn cooperates with Sistine and manages to defeat Lofan by using the same tactic he used while battling Leos. Then Lofan runs away and the fight was over. Afterward, Glenn went to meet his students. This anime ends with Glenn returning to school to teach his students. And that's the end of the video. As always, if you liked what you saw, subscribe to the channel. I'll be uploading a lot of videos just like this, so I'll see you at the next one.